So up until now, the programs we've written essentially do the same thing every single time that we run them. We can actually write programs that make decisions. These kinds of programs have different paths that they can take, and that's also known as branching. Here in the comment, I have the operators that we can use with the if statements. They are listed in your Xi books, but I'll go through them quickly. We have less than or equals to, greater than or equals to, equals, not equals, and, or, and not. I'll move this out of the way so I can just write some example code. Alright. So here's a simple if statement, and so pretty much in the parentheses here we need to have some sort of Boolean expression, which again is something that evaluates to true or false. So if the expression in the if statement evaluates to true, it will run everything in this block of code, so everything in between these two brackets. If I switch it to false, everything in these brackets will simply be ignored. And yeah, Eclipse can detect stuff like that. So if you can see, I'm highlighting over the sections it's highlighting, and it's telling me that it's dead code, which is code that will never ever run, no matter what. So now I'll just show you a couple different ways we can use an if statement. So let me just add some print statements real quick. Okay. Alright. So you wouldn't really write an if statement typically with just true or false as the expression. So I'll just demonstrate a couple other ways we can write them. So first we can use Boolean variables. Alright. Yeah, so here this reads, if my bool is equal to true, then let's execute this statement. Now if we have a Boolean variable in here, we don't really need to have this last part. That's kind of the longhand notation, but Boolean variables by themselves are either true or false, so we can just get rid of that. So that will execute if my bool happens to be true when this statement's executed, and not if it's not. So I'll go ahead and run that. Yeah. So that printed. Let's look at an example with something else. So it's 5. So with with integers, we can use the relational and equivalence operators. So we can say something like, if A is greater than B, then do this, which it will because 5 is greater than 1. Or we can use greater than or equal, or than, so in this case it wouldn't print that. Or if we want to see if A is exactly equal to B, we can use that. And if we want to make sure that A isn't equal to B, we can use the not equals operator. Also, we can use multiple operators and kind of build up a bigger Boolean expression if we want to. So, for example, we could say, I'll change this back. So if A is greater than B, or true, for example, we can use another variable, I guess. Oops. So yeah, this will just take some getting used to with Boolean logic if you haven't seen it much before, but yeah, we could have a ridiculously long expression. And we can keep adding things because the entire expression will eventually evaluate down to either true or false. So yeah, in this case, so if A is less than B, will be false. But we're ORing it with myBool, which is true. So this statement will run, and yeah. But if we use AND instead of OR, this will not run because both sides of an AND operator must be true. So you can see the middle line didn't print there. So a program like this won't ever really change paths or take a different branch because we're initializing all the variables, and all the conditions that we're putting in the if statement are just coming from things that we define. But for example, if we were taking input from a user through the console or something else, then we can start making different decisions in our program. So another thing I want to show you is the else statement. Let me get rid of this quick. Which looks like that. Let me get rid of this stuff. Okay, sorry about that. So when we use an if statement, we can add an else at the end of it, so if you have an if together with an else, one of these code blocks will run, but not both. So one will absolutely run, but it's impossible to have both of them run. If the expression in the if statement evaluates to false, so this block will be skipped, and the else block will take over and just run whatever's in here. Let me write something quick that'll give us different inputs. So int value equals next. Yeah. So yeah, value will have a random value that's either going to be 0 or 1. So we can say if value is equal to 0, let's print something. So that'll actually give us different things every time we run it. Maybe. Oh, sorry. The value in the next int method is an exclusive upper bound. So if I want to generate a number between 0 and 1, I would have to pass it 2 because it doesn't include this number. Yeah, there we go. So that can change, and you can see it's executing the different statements using if and else. Lastly, we can kind of nest if statements by using else if. So else if will only be evaluated if all of the if statements before it evaluated to false. So let me change this to 3. So now value can either be 0, 1, or 2. So let me add the print statements. So yeah, that'll print 1, and so there's little tricks you can do with if and else statements. An example would be how in this last statement we don't have to explicitly check if value is equal to 2 like we're doing for the first two. So usually by the else statement you've already eliminated every other possibility. So here we know it'll either be 0, 1, or 2. So if it's not 0 and it's not 1, we can assume that it's 2. Yeah, so that's changing. And lastly, we can have multiple else if statements. So, whoops. What's going on? Oh. Yeah, so for else if you have to have a condition. We'll add another value and bump that up a little bit. So yeah, you can pretty much have as many else if statements as you want for every if statement. But you can only have one else statement for every if statement. And you really only want to use else if and else if the things you need to check are actually related to what you're checking in the first statement. So if all we cared about was whether or not value is equal to 0, and then we had something different we wanted to check, we could just write another if statement after that.